Okay, so I'm going to be asking you today to consider the power of language. And at the end of the block, you will come up here and you will sign your initials very quickly. And this is what you're signing to, the outcome that we hope for. I can distinguish between Horatian and Juvenalian satire and recognize the usefulness of each type. If you can distinguish between the two, you put your initials here. If you can further recognize the usefulness of each type, you'll put your initials here. The objective of today's lesson was to identify the types of satire, not just see satire as one generic genre. I wanted them to be able to recognize the differences and the uses. Okay, I'm going to read an essay to you right now. It's called The Speech the Graduates Didn't Hear, and it's by Jacob Neiser, who was a professor at Brown University. We, the faculty, take no pride in our educational achievements with you. We have prepared you for a world that does not exist, indeed, that cannot exist. You have spent 4 years supposing that failure leaves no record. You have learned at Brown University that when your work goes poorly, the painless solution is to drop out. But starting now, in the world to which you go, failure marks you. Confronting difficulty by quitting leaves you changed. Outside Brown, quitters are no heroes. And that is why, on this commencement day, we have nothing in which to take much pride. So you all have this passage in front of you to look at again. And now you're going to annotate the passage. You're going to be looking for tone words, style, to support your position about the effectiveness of this essay, all right? As soon as you are through, you're going to go right into Harkness mode. You're going to discuss it with each other. And eventually this is going to lead to the whiteboard collaboration/competitions that we have. So you're collecting evidence now as we go. I'm constantly working with evidence-based claims and going from there to a higher level of thinking. I think they need to be able to understand tone. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of our students, to grasp the tone. Is this ironic? Is this straight? And so much of what they do isn't a matter of right and wrong. It's their opinion that they need to back up with evidence from the text.
I do believe what he's saying has some truth to it, but it's a little bit over the top, and maybe that's what he wanted to do, just in order to get us to see something he wanted us to see, he had to exaggerate a little bit just to get the point across, but...
Almost more of a stab in the gut.
He's definitely emphasizing it to try and get his point across.
Yeah, I mean, it does evenly distribute blame for poor education on the student and the teachers. And at the end, when it says, like, it talks about when you go out into the world, and it says, like, don't be a fool and talk to everyone else like you know something because you don't. I mean, it's saying that whatever degree they got on their graduation day, you're not any better.
I definitely think it has two audiences, between definitely the students as pretty much just saying that you're all practically the same, like none of you are different, despite what your education or diploma says. Like you said, that was just...
To the second page of your packet. And then you get to do some more annotating, because the third page here, you goody, is an excerpt from Pride and Prejudice. It's Mr. Collins' refusal to accept rejection. We are almost at the end of Pride and Prejudice, so satire was a logical choice for me to be sure they understood before we left it, because a lot of the students really do see that as a romance, a love story, and they can miss the satire if we're not careful. And I wanted them to know that there was more than one use for satire.
Pretty much just blamed it on her being a woman in the end. Like, yeah, because he said it is, or was it? Well, he pretty much
According
said,
to the practice of
according to the practice of your sex, that you would deny the first proposal, which I thought was funny, because then afterwards he goes by saying, I highly doubt you'll ever get proposed to again, so, you know. And I'm like, okay, but you just said they denied the first one, now you're saying they'll never get, so what's your purpose here?
But the way that she rejects him is so nice. Like, it says,
Right.
cried Elizabeth with some warmth. She still says thank you and for the honor, and she's still, like, being really polite about it, even though she's continuously rejecting him over and over again.
Yeah.
So it can't be in a bitter way that Juvenalian
Right.
is.
What sets the tone and makes it seem like Horatian? You could say something about irony, how it's extremely ironic. The whole situation is just ironic that he thinks her rejection is her falling in love with him, when in reality she's rejecting his proposal for marriage.
They use words like honor to explain the class system going on and to show that Elizabeth is technically below Mr. Collins, and so he doesn't understand why it is that she could never want to be with him. So it's just a really long strain of verbal irony with him insisting that she must be lying and using words like your honor, your charming, your elegance. But she's insisting that that's not who she is, and following by her feelings and how rational she is.
I thought that the application of the incisive analysis was more apparent to me as they first listed their claims, then moved on to the supporting evidence that they had collected from the text, and then were able to synthesize it into some kind of conclusion that was persuasive for their classmates.
We got the sense that the author was disillusioned with college students in general, and that he was personally affected by something that had happened. So it was almost like a personal attack, and the use of second person really emphasized that. And we said it was also hypocritical because a lot of the traits they listed here, like when they were talking about how when you go out into the real world, no one's going to baby you, and no one's going to just stand there and listen to work that is subpar. And a lot of that stuff does happen with adults too. They make a lot of the same mistakes as the college students do. But he uses these words that are very pointed and bitter and biting to describe things that are actually pervasive throughout all society, not just college students in general.
The kind of words that were used to describe everything were all so strongly negative and bitter, like using words like predictable failure, calling the teachers and professors shallow, and saying that what we learned is lies, all sort of bring it together as something that is super critical and harsh to try to get his point across, almost to the point where it's offensive to the people who are reading it. If you're a student reading it or a professor reading it, you're called out so harshly and bitterly that it's offending. Whereas, you can go on with the Horatian.
We said that the Horatian was the Pride and Prejudice reading that we did. And it's a lot gentler than the speech. Mr. Collins, he keeps asking her and saying that, oh, you're going to accept me if I keep asking, but he's not being forceful about it. He's more, this is just what he believes, and he doesn't try to say it in a rude way.
So many different perspectives are of value that we're not just looking for one perspective. They can learn from each other and recognize strengths in other people is a virtue, and it's going to be very helpful for them.
The way Yafan talked about it, like the emotion and the sort of gentleness of the satire, I mean, people are easily offended. Humanity and society, we're all very like kind of me being right. And by calling someone out so directly and negatively, it's going to shut people off from trying to change to it, whereas the sort of warm suggestiveness is more often like taken into account by people. So I thought that the way that was touched on was more successful.